Chapter 12, Daughter of the Empire. On the day that Jinto and Leifir arrived in Lokfakar, a meeting of the Council of Abdicant Emperors convened in the Imperial Palace. The council was made up of one abdicant emperor chosen from each of the 8 royal families. Its only functions were to oversee the promotion of, and reward or punish, star pilots that were imperial family members. Under the principle, or perhaps pretense, that the most outstanding star pilot among a generation in the imperial family was to occupy the Jade Throne, it was the role of the Council of Abdicant Emperors to take their time in choosing the emperor to be. Needless to say, the topic of the session was to deliberate whether the first royal princess of the royal house of Cryeb was a worthy star pilot, and by that token, a worthy candidate for the emperorship. The meeting lasted for 5 days. In addition to Leifir's own report, they scrutinized the testimonies of the former baron and servants that had been pulled out of the Feb-barony. Finally, on the last day, Leifir was called to the Wabeus Fanagalak, Chamber of Abdicant Emperors, which was a spacious, circular room with the 8-headed Gofnash dragon depicted on the floor's center and a raised platform in front. When Leifir identified herself, the holograms of the various abdicants appeared. They were the elders of the Avriel, old souls trapped in young flesh. Leifir bowed down. "We are gathered to determine whether you, Fi Lamhir of the Royal House of Cryeb, are suitable to be appointed a star pilot. We have some questions for you, and so we shall be conducting a hearing," declared Spuna Rika, former emperor, Nisith Dugasser, their eminence Dugas. "Raise your face and look up, Fi Lamhir," spoke Nisith Dusum of the Lartia Balgzidar, Royal House of Balgzid, eldest of the Imperials. "Yes," said Leifir. All 8 abdicant emperors were gazing down at her, including Dugas and Dusum, who stood at the center. It appeared the 2 of them would be the driving force behind Leifir's hearing. Dugas was among the youngest of the abdicants, but he too had already reached centenarian age. Of course, his 100+ years did not mar his youthful form. Physically, his aging had stopped halfway through adolescence, and so one could still see the sprightly boy in his especially juvenile visage. On the other hand, Dusum was well past 2 centuries in age. He had a poise all his own, his long flowing ringlets the light purple that came with occasional bleaching. For one reason or another, he relied on his frocras and was not wont to open his eyes. Even now, his eyes were screwed firmly shut. Leifir was nervous. Though this was the first time she'd been the subject of the council's discussion, she had heard various things about it. Rumor had it that since the abdicants, who had retired from both war and commerce, had nothing else to do, they had honed their skills in ferreting out the faults of young Avriel. "Usually, Reduraf Bukrager, star pilot aptitude examinations, are boring affairs," said Dugas. "Most children may believe otherwise, but picking apart every little thing about a trainee star pilot's conduct is not a very amusing pastime. One among us has commanded a fleet of 100,000 ships, and another among us has laid waste to a notorious interstellar power. Why, then, would we take delight in such trifling concerns?" This was a nod to the achievements of Nisith Dullard, their eminence Dullard, who led the Shishine campaign 100 years prior. "However, your case was a fun one, Fi," said Ramlin of the Lartia Weskir, Royal House of Weskir. Giving the title of Fi a disdainful tang was a special skill of the elderly Imperials. "Your actions were found to be unmindful in numerous ways. The atmospheric leakage incident in the Feb-barony was particularly difficult to overlook," said Dugas. "A petition was filed by the former Baron of Feb-, spoke Ramin of the Lartia Skir, Royal House of Skir. "He asked that we refrain from censuring you for your behavior at the barony. However, he is operating under a false impression. It is not the task of the Council of Abdicant Emperors to call you to account. We are here solely to judge your aptitude to be a star pilot. As such, the Empire shall take responsibility for your impressive wake of destruction, deeming it collateral war damage." Leifir had had no doubt otherwise, so she simply stood there. "Regardless, the air leak is a serious matter. You can never know for certain what may happen in the midst of battle. And though we may have proclaimed ourselves the kin of the stars, I do believe you're aware that we cannot survive without air to breathe," quipped Dugas sarcastically. Yes. Naturally, this only heightened her unease. Nothing would be more humiliating than to be seen as incompetent despite her clear desire to fulfill her duties. If she was to be judged not worthy to be appointed star pilot, she would have rather not survived her ordeal. That being said, the council was unanimous in agreeing that that was a mistake any very young trainee star pilot could be guilty of, said Dusum. Every one of the people gathered here spent their trainee period uneventfully, but went on to make astonishing blunders after becoming star pilots. Do you remember, Nisith Ramlin, the day you stood here and were demoted from Commodore to Hecto Commander? Your Eminence, objected a blushing Ramlin, I question the necessity to bring up things long since past. Dusum continued addressing Lafier. Notwithstanding, there are two issues even we cannot gloss over. We would like to hear your thoughts on those points. What might they be? Resolutely, Lafier stared at the eldest of the Avriel. One could only wonder whether Dusum, who had dispensed with his vision, was able to pick up on the ardent pride of younger Avriel. A faint smile played about his lips. Said Dusum, while in the Feb- barony, did you or did you not make use of your status as an imperial to incite a rebellion against the baron? Before she could answer, Dugas piped up, Lam here, it is said we Avriel's souls blaze with imperial wrath. Reluctantly, I must agree. From time to time, I too lose myself to anger. Be that as it may, our subjects not only accept our rule, but harbor love and affection for us. Do you know why that is? It's because they can distinguish between fury as an individual and fury as the empire. Even when one is driven by wrath, if that wrath has nothing to do with the empire, they do not use the bludgeon that is imperial authority, which no one ought to oppose, to strike one's personal enemy. And even if there were only one Avriel left, if a fool who would wield the Rugruk, imperial command staff, as a cudgel impelled by personal passions were ever to accede to the Jade Throne, our subjects would lose faith in us. Ever since the founding emperor, the ultimate role of the Council of Abdicant Emperors has been to expel those who misunderstand the true meaning of pride from the path to the emperorship. Please wait, Nisith, Lafier interrupted. Speak, Dusum permitted. I did not abuse my social status, nor did I incite a rebellion. I merely asked for the aid of the imperial citizens as a soldier of the star forces to end the Baron's meddling in my mission. Dusum crossed his arms. I see. That does make some sense. However, if you did not bear the Avriel family name, would it have played out as smoothly? That is not something that has to do with me. What exactly do you mean by that? Said Dugas, brows knitted. It was battle, and in battle, luck is a factor. In that I happened to be an Avriel, fortune favored me. If ever I forget to acknowledge luck and boast of my achievements to no effect, then you may call me haughty, but I did not forget. If you had been gentry by birth, what would you have done? I would have acted no differently whatsoever, Lafier replied without delay. Even now, I cannot think of a superior plan I could have adopted to ensure the mission succeeded. Dusum smiled. You may yet be a baby bird, but I must admit, you did well to come through it all. Lafier couldn't tell whether by come through it all, he meant the events at the Feb- barony, or this hearing. Very well. Should you earn the sympathies of the abdicants, that will be the end of that matter. Have any of you any objections? Dugas paused. No objection was made. Then there's but a single issue left to discuss, Dugas continued. And it is this question that is the most significant by far. In fact, it involves the very foundation of the empire. We hear you have promised to furnish interstellar ships to terrestrial citizens of the Svagov Marquisate. That isn't true, Lafier rebutted. All I promised them was that I would beseech Her Majesty the Empress to lend them one or more interstellar ships. It's understandable, given how wet behind the ears you are, but you do not fully grasp the weight behind the words of the imperial family. Whenever an Avriel suggests something may be possible, people will assume it will definitely occur. And if it never materializes, they will consider it breaking a promise. Not only that, said Raman, but they will then misconstrue it as having been a lie to save your own skin. It will manifest as a mark of shame. Lafier found herself raising her voice. Your Eminences, that statement is incredibly one-sided. There is no way you will get your wish to begin with, said Dugas calmly. According to the Darfus customs of the Empire, a person below gentry in status cannot borrow an interstellar ship. Did you not know that? I was not aware of that, Leifir bit her lip. The customs of the empire were wide-ranging, complicated, and arcane. And though she knew the basics, she'd never paid the trivial little details any attention. Now, how ought we to settle this? Dagass shook his head. That you didn't know the custom was an unavoidable development, but a moment's thought would have clued you in. The Empire and terrestrial citizens owe each other nothing, as the Empire hold terrestrial governments under their aegis, and those governments hold their citizens under their protection. Terrestrial citizens are, in a way, immaterial in the eyes of the Empire. Why then, did you think interstellar ships could be lent to such people? How heedless of you, Fee, said Ramlin. Leifir didn't know what to say. She had not made any surefire guarantee. Anger against the Avriel elders flared within her. They were being unreasonable, irrational. Yet now that they had explained the weight behind the words of the imperial family, she realized there was truth in that idea. After all, she remembered when the servants had misconstrued her promise at the Feb-barony. Suddenly, a ringing laugh. It was Nisith Dism, their Eminence Dism, of the royal family of Bars. Your Eminences, said Dism, who spoke for the first time, it is just as His Eminence Dagass stated earlier. It would be cruel to pillory a fledgling whose wings have not yet grown feathers. Besides, it is not as though the royal princess endeavored to tell some hideous lie. All she did was speak the truth. Leifir was taken aback. She had not been expecting a helping hand. That is not good enough, Nisith. Those terrestrial citizens will believe they were deliberately deceived by an Avriel. That is the problem, Dagass insisted. Then would it not be for the best to lend them the interstellar ship, said Dism breezily. Not you too. Must I repeat the words of Nisith Duradr? In the end, those terrestrial citizens saved a daughter of the Empire. Dism cut in. That is a deed worthy of appointment to gentry status. If they are appointed to gentry, and lent an interstellar ship, then the problem disappears. You would have terrestrial citizens be made gentry so abruptly? That would be unprecedented, protested Durid. The Count of Hyde wasn't even a terrestrial citizen to start with. Compared to that, then, it was your son that so readily set that precedent, Larth Rika Barkor, former king of Bars, said Durid bitterly. Disma's face turned cool. Please hold on, Nisith, said Nisith Lamadr, their Eminence Lamad, of the Lartia Elik, Royal House of Elik. According to the report, they desire secession from the Empire. Would they take any joy in the prospect of being gentry of that empire? It matters not whether or not they take joy in it. It is their right to turn down the offer. If they refuse to be gentry, then they cannot be lent interstellar ships, even by us. That is all. They may have gone underground, said Dagass. That is fine. The abdicant of the royal house of Bars grinned mysteriously. As luck would have it, the airship fleet is operating in the Svagov Marquisate. If we were to send the rank and file to search for them, we can accompany them anywhere, by gunpoint if necessary. Let us inform the populace that they are to be appointed as gentry. They can then accept or refuse the offer, with the understanding that if they refuse, they will not be lent interstellar ships, but will be given some other reward as consolation. But the Star Forces aren't geared toward that sort of work, said Lamad. If it proves beyond the Star Force's powers, then that just means we should employ the Institute of Crests. This is insane, thought Leifir, who had gone pale. Much as the name suggested, Institute of Crests was a government office that dealt in the safekeeping of the crests of nobles and gentry, and managed genealogical trees and family ranks. However, their operations expanded from there, and now they also administered covert investigations throughout the domains and territory nations, taking on the role of a kind of secret police. I thought we were talking about gratitude, said Durid uncomfortably. Yes, this is of course an act of thanks. We don't wish to be called ungrateful. The fan-shaped sleeves of Dusama's Fexiic vestment fluttered. That is why we will hold a pomp-filled appointment ceremony on Klasbiel's surface. Oh, and it would be wise as well to invite people known for being secessionist party members and extremists as the guests of honor. Why in tarnation would we do that? Said Dagass, flashing Dusam an extremely confused look. Those that yearn for independence disdain the Empire. I believe they are laughing at us and look down on the Empire as being unable to crack down on them. Are you saying we should clamp down on them, Nisith? Repulsed, Dagass hid his mouth with a sleeve. That would be inelegant. Of course not. If we did that, the Star Forces and the Institute of Crests alike would swell to enormous size. It would indeed be far from the realm of the elegant. Dusuma's smile turned yet ghastlier. That said, we cannot tolerate their open contempt. To be hated is of no concern to us, but to be slighted is another matter. It is not that the Empire isn't capable of clamping down, it's that it elects not to. In other words, teaching the terrestrial citizens that the Empire can hunt down those who do not submit at any time if it so chooses might just prove an entertaining diversion. Their initial scheme is likely to threaten the Empire. Is it not necessary to give them a dose of reality? You spore, said Ramin gleefully. I've always thought the family name of the royal house of Bars isn't Avriel, but Spore. The way such devious ideas come to you. Leifir couldn't stand it any longer. Your Eminences, allow me to inform you that I am grateful to those people. I may even be rather fond of them. Their ways are different from our own, but they are proud folk in their own way. So, I implore you not to rebuke them. This is a great example of how misunderstood we often are, said Dusum, spreading his besleeved arms wide. Even our own relatives can misunderstand us. Such is the fruit of our lack of discretion. Fee, I am saying that we very much ought to thank them. Why do I get the feeling that tendency to be misunderstood, grumbled Lamad, is not so much the fruit of our indiscretions, but rather springs from what a certain royal family has assiduously built up. But her derision fell on deaf ears. But Nisith, we lack the authority to decide on such a plan, Durid pointed out. Then we should ask Her Majesty Lamas to decide. It wouldn't take much time at all, either. Kindly wait a moment, Your Eminences. Dusuma's hologram disappeared. The projections of the other abdicants froze. Leifir could tell something was being discussed someplace she couldn't overhear, but she had no choice but to stand in place and wait to be addressed. At last, Dusum returned. The holograms of the rest of the abdicants resumed moving as though returning to life. Your Eminences, Lamas intoned. There was no hologram of her, only her audio. We heard tell of the issue from Nisith Dizumer. We had been racking our mind over a suitable token of gratitude toward the terrestrial citizens. As such, we thank Your Eminences for your wise counsel. We shall adopt the measure at once. In my name, it shall be arranged. And so, with this, the matter is settled, said Dusum. So it is, nodded Dugas, though his expression was fastidious. Now the risk that the honor of the Avriels would be tarnished has cleared up. I wasn't aware patching up the mistakes of a trainee star pilot was a role of the Council of Abdicants, frowned Durid. Is it not the duty of old birds to smooth over the little one's blunders? Dusum retorted. In any case, we must make our final decision. We have been discussing for 5 days, and we have no more questions for Fee Lam here, said Dusum. Let us hear Your Eminences' opinions. I hereby acknowledge that Fee Lam here has the aptitude to be a star pilot. With that, Ramina's hologram put his hands to his shoulders and disappeared. I have no objections either, said Lamad, herself vanishing. Though I feel as though we've struck a tremendous blow to custom this day, said Durid, shaking his head and putting his hands to his shoulders. I suppose there's naught to be done about it. I'm looking forward to your future. I know you'll be able to overshadow my ignoble past, said Ramlin. Then she, too, disappeared. It's as though I'm looking at my own daughter when she was small, spoke Nisith Lemamer, Her Eminence Lemamek, Leifir's great-grandmother, for the first time in the meeting. Perhaps she was not taking her position very seriously. Be sure to pay me a visit before you receive another mission. You truly look just like Her Majesty Lamas. You may just be the one to take the throne after my son. With that, Dusum vanished. Let us meet again, little one. Though I hope that the next hearing will be easier on all of us, said Dusum. Congratulations, Wing Star Pilot Avriel. To round out the meeting, Dugas saluted her, albeit his salute was a little off, and vanished. To the Av, the concept of seasons was not linked to the time of year, but to the mood in the air. The Larbe Crybe, Royal Palace of Crybe, had a garden for spring, summer, autumn, and winter, each with their ecosystem and temperature adjusted accordingly. Seated on a wooden bench in the autumn garden, Jinto counted the colored leaves dancing down. So, that's where you were. Jinto looked toward the voice. There stood Leifir. She was not in her military uniform. Rather, she was wearing a bright golden long robe over a green jumpsuit with the graceful and florid circlet of a royal princess. In her arms, she held a kitten. Yeah, it's the most calming place for me. Lord Crieb told me to think of this place as my own home, but it's really a bit too big to square with the concept I have in my head of my own home. Sure, it was small compared to the Imperial Palace, whose population once numbered over 1 million, but the Royal Palace of Crieb was an artificial planet in its own right. It was voluminous enough to house 50,000 people, and currently there were 10,000 who dwelt there in order to manage the Sode Crieb, Crieb Gate, and the Royal Palace. Leifir sat herself next to him. Were you thinking about your territory nations? Nah. He was surprised himself. I didn't even look back at my home planets. Not even a little? Leifir looked shocked. Not really. For some reason, hearing that I've lost contact with my home, I just don't feel sad at all. I'm actually relieved. Like a heavy burden's been lifted. I'm an awful person, aren't I? I don't know, she said, confused. Are you not worried about your father? I thought I was worried about him, tried to convince myself I was, but I've come to realize that in my heart, I'm not. I mean, he's bound to be fine. He was born and raised in Martinu, and he's got experience and personal connections. If we survived Klaspule, he's sure to. But he realized at that moment that that was a lie. Martinua's ecosystem had arisen independently of Earth's and was hostile to humans. Respect for the indigenous environment was drilled into Martinians from an early age. That meant that the only way his father could survive was by hiding in one of the planet's hybrid structure buildings, but any serious manhunt would turn him up given how limited the space was. And worst of all, the greater part of the Martinian populace despised him. In all likelihood, the Count of Hyde was no longer of this world. Jinto changed the subject. What's with the cat? He's named Diaho. He's the son of Zeneria, the daughter of Horia. Here you are, Diaho. Leifir let go of the kitten on the chaise. He was born while I was out doing navigation drills. Jinto recalled what Horia referred to. It was the name of the cat that Leifir had believed, when she was a wee lass, to be her mother. So that'd make you this cat's aunt. Yuan. That epithet again. Jinto held his hand out, and Diaho seized upon it, rubbing his head against it. Leifir looked vexed, and, for whatever reason, saw fit to apologize for Diaho. Despite being a cat, he hasn't a stoic bone in his body. Zeneria was much the same. It's adorable, if you ask me. Jinto tickled his throat. Tomorrow, you'll be headed to the Quartermaster's Academy, if I recall. Yeah, somebody's coming to pick me up after breakfast. Since there's a war on now, a lot of kids got their date of entrance moved up, and it looks like I'll just be another in the crowd. Thanks to that, I don't have to worry about how I'll be starting late in the year. That said, I'll be living the life academic for 3 whole years. Please don't feel down over it. He transferred Diaho to his lap and faced Leifir. How about you? It's still undecided which ship I'll be on. Leifir shook her head. Gotcha. Well, enjoy your moment of peace, I'd say. You'll be spending your every day on the battlefield for a good clip. Yeah, Leifir nodded. 3 years. In 3 years, you'll be a Fikdadeixazwar, Quartermaster Liewing Star Pilot. If everything goes smoothly, yeah. By 3 years' time, I will most likely have become a Deca Commander, with the right to receive a small vessel, either an escort ship or an assault ship. Personally, I'd prefer an assault ship. Right. Jinto caressed Diaho's scruff, wondering what she was trying to say. Each assault ship requires a Quartermaster Liewing Star Pilot to serve as a clerk. And, as per Star Forces tradition, a ship's captain has some say in its personnel affairs. It's far from set in stone, but if the captain and the officer agree on it, then it should come to pass, she said, staring at him interrogatively. Of course, Jinto understood what she expected from him. Oh, future Deca Commander Avriel, said Jinto, putting on airs, if at that time there should be a man named Fikdadeixazwar, you have but to call him by your side, and he will serve as your loyal clerk. Okay. Leifir's face shone bright. If you put it that way, I suppose I have no other choice. I do have my misgivings, mind you. It's virtually set in stone that I will be a Deca Commander in 3 years' time. That means it's up to you to be diligent and work your way up to being a quartermaster Liewing pilot. Yeah, don't worry. I'll expend every effort, Leifier. All right, then, Jinto, we'll see each other again at the supper table. Leifier stood up forcefully. I'm rather busy at the moment. Hey, what about Daiho? Jinto embraced the kitten in his arms. You've clearly taken a liking for him, so you ought to take him as your conversation partner. It's not as though you haven't the time. Can't say I'm as busy, no, he said resignedly, putting him back on his lap. You're kind of a boring conversationalist, though. Daiho responded by sniffing his fingers. As he let the kitten entertain itself on his lap, Jinto ruminated. You're as terrible a liar as ever, Leifier. But I'm happy I can spend more time by your side. I'll age with time, and my lifespan is half yours at best. But I want to spend as much of my short life with you as possible. Whether you ascend to the Jade Throne or crumble to smithereens in a pocket of flat space, know that I'll be there with you. I'll see your destiny play out to the end, even if it displeases you. That is my will, the future I chose of my own volition. The value of one's life is bought and determined by offering the freedom they were born with for sale. Kudurin would probably wince and tell me it's too early to sell, but something tells me an opportunity this sweet won't come twice. After all, the buyer isn't the Empire. It's you, Leifier. You'll never taste the thrill, understand the joy of selling your freedom. Members of the Imperial family aren't born with any. Memories of the planet Martine's exotic jungle floated to mind. It was the great new motherland of all Martinians. But now he could only think of it as a foreign landscape compared to the sea of Gerulac stars. Hey, Daiho. Tell me, who am I? What am I? The kitty meowed.